Hi, I'm Mel Van Dusen, and welcome to the show. You know, I think many of us can remember as children some defining moment where some incident happened that took our lives in a different direction. And for me, one of those defining moments was when I was in the 4th grade. And Mrs. Duckworth, my teacher, would have a lottery every so often, and lucky children would go to some interesting event. And for me, when I was chosen one time, we got to go to the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum in San Jose. And seeing the mummies there and going through the tomb and looking through at all these artifacts and really learning about an ancient mystical system, I remember that it seemed kind of similar to what I had learned in the church, but not really. But anyway, that was the beginning of a process for me whereby I looked for the commonality in the various religions and philosophies. And today, we have with us here, who better to explain this but the President and the Grand Master of the Rosicrucians, Julie Scott. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mel.
Yeah. Julie, how would you describe the Rosicrucian Order to someone who had never heard of it?
The Rosicrucian Order is a philosophical and educational organization. It's not a religion, and members are all around the world, men and women who study natural laws in order to live in harmony with them.
And what do you mean by natural laws?
Well, natural laws are things such as cycles or understanding the growth patterns or understanding how things work in nature so that we can apply it in our own lives.
I imagine when people look at Rosicrucian Park, I think the museum is the only museum in the world with Egyptian-style architecture.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. They look at all these strange images and they wonder, you know, what in the world is going on in there? So what is the greatest misunderstanding that people have about the Rosicrucian Order?
Well, typically I think people misunderstand and believe that the Rosicrucian Order is a religion, which it is not. We encourage Rosicrucians to participate in whatever religion they choose to or not. And I think people also misunderstand anything that's called mysterious or mystical because it may seem a little bit spooky or unusual when really, again, these are just natural laws that people can understand and then apply in their lives.
I checked out your website, and there's a Rosicrucian timeline, and help me to understand this, but on the timeline there is Atlantis, dynastic Egypt, the Essenes, the Orphic Mysteries, the Pythagorean School, Eleusis, the Isis Mysteries, Kabbalah, Mithraic Mysteries, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, alchemy, the Templars, and the Sophia tradition. What is the common thread that holds all these different traditions together as it comes down to us today as the Rosicrucian Order? Well,
this is a tradition that's been perpetuated over the millennia. And it started thousands of years ago when people had a much closer relationship with nature and understood things in a different way than we do now. And people gave their lives to perpetuate this wisdom. Sometimes these various traditions that you just mentioned had to go underground in order to protect themselves. Yet there were always individuals who perpetuated this wisdom and allowed it to be passed on and never lost.
Give us an example of an ancient mystery religion and how that helped the people at the time.
Well, these are in various traditions. There's the ancient Egyptian traditions.
Give us an example of that.
Well, there were initiations that took place in ancient Egypt, and these presented objective lessons of laws that showed that we're really connected with each other, and even more than that, that we have a connection with the divine. The Greeks did the same thing in the Eleusinian mysteries and at the tradition at Delphi. Now, I don't want to suggest that anyone knows exactly what took place in their initiations. These ancient traditions usually required that the participants promised not to share the secrets of the initiation. However, we are familiar with the traditions and with their philosophy and can understand from that.
How do you understand the word divine? You used that word before. What does that word mean to you?
Well, the divine is that spark that exists within us, that is a piece or an aspect of whatever the great mystery of the universe is. Some people call it God or the cosmic. Rosicrucians never define God or the divine. It's understanding that there's a power that's greater than we are individually and with which we can feel connected.
Now, here between us, we have this figure. Rather than let him just languish there throughout the interview, why don't you introduce him?
Well, this is a very important philosopher, not just in the Rosicrucian tradition, actually to practically everyone in Western civilization. This is Pythagoras. And he began the Pythagorean school centuries before our era. And these were mystics who were so reverent of the divine or the cosmic or the natural laws around them that they spent their entire lives studying them. They studied laws and relationships. For example, the relationship between music and mathematics. And this was really the beginning of the scientific inquiry. So science began in Western civilization as we know it with the Pythagorean school. And these were mystics who sought to understand science in order to feel closer with the divine.
So they brought science and mysticism together as they could at the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think this is a good time to give people who are watching an idea, who haven't been to the Rosicrucian Park here in San Jose, and just an idea of the park itself. And there's some things I'd like you to comment on. I think at the very beginning there's the entryway into the park, and on one side of it there's a scale, and I'd like you to tell us what the symbolism of that is. So if we could see that cutaway shot, please.
This is one of the entrances to Rosicrucian Park. This is the scale of judgment, where you see the feather of truth weighed against the heart to make sure that you've lived a good life. You'd face this at the end of your life in a tomb in ancient Egypt. So here we go into Rosicrucian Park, which we began almost 80 years ago. This is the front of our science building that's in the center of Rosicrucian Park with our fountain of waters. This is the outdoor shrine in which are interred the ashes of the founder of our organization, H. Spencer Lewis. And here is the Grand Temple of the Rosicrucian Order. Members meet here regularly.
Julie, the park is beautiful. We saw just a few things there that I could get on the camera, but they're magnificent buildings and expanses of areas and really grand buildings. I encourage people to go to the park and check it out. It's a beautiful place.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Do you spend much time there?
I do spend a lot of time there. I purposely moved close to Rosicrucian Park. It's in a beautiful neighborhood, and our grounds are tenderly cared for. Yeah, I enjoy spending time there, even in my off time.
Right, and we're in the heart of Silicon Valley here. Have you found that many people think that mysticism is hostile towards science and vice versa?
Well, it depends on the individual. However, I know a lot of scientists. There are a lot of Rosicrucians who are hardcore scientists who just keep going deeper and deeper until you have no choice but to reach the mystical. And certainly a lot of mystics who find the science of the world around us quite fascinating as well.
And you have a progression of courses that you offer, I think. And it starts out with such subjects as the illusory nature of time and space and meditation. It goes on to free will, karma, and reincarnation. And by the end of this program, what might a person expect?
Well, the Rosicrucians of centuries ago were alchemists. And these were people who didn't just turn lead into gold. They used alchemy as an allegory for their refining their qualities from the more dense to the more refined.
In themselves.
In themselves, yeah. This was
Right.
personal transformation.
So metals were a metaphor for something that was within.
Right.
Right.
Yes, and so the idea is that as you're exposed to new ideas, to more than just the usual ways of perceiving, that you develop abilities that you may not have had before, that you open your mind to other ideas, to other cultures, and this adds not only to our personal growth, but also to understanding others and tolerance of other cultures.
How has being with the order enriched your life?
Well, it's enriched my life in so many ways. First of all, I've met some fascinating people, been introduced to just such interesting topics, and it's done a lot for me personally in understanding and being educated in topics that I just hadn't been exposed to before.
For example?
Well, developing my intuition and understanding simple things like physiology and biology, as well as probably most especially understanding the wisdom of the ancients and how this can be applied today.
Can you give me one example about how one can improve their intuition? That's not secret.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
not secret. Well, there are very simple techniques. You can do something such as when the phone rings, pause and see if you can intuit who it is that's calling you. And you start with very simple exercises like this that eventually we introduce all the topics that a Rosicrucian studies in the first 15 months of the lessons. And then we go back and address them in a spiral, coming at them from different perspectives over many years of study. So that one wasn't a secret.
Okay. Good. Now you know, it was only after you agreed to be on the show that I found out that you were the Grand Master. And that kind of took me aback. Do you ever wake up in the morning and think to yourself, my God, I'm the Grand Master of the Rosicrucians?
Well, I know what it means to be the Grand Master, and it means that I'm the lead ritualistic officer. So I am a Rosicrucian student like every other Rosicrucian. We don't have a guru in our organization. I'm learning like everyone else. So I understand completely what it means to have that title, and if anything, it may mean that I'm the most humble student of all. I'm learning a lot.
You are. You know, when I first met you, I thought, my God, this is someone that I could really relax with. There's no pretense here.
Oh, well, thank you.
There's no overpowering energy that was going to blow me away. I find you just tremendously open and accessible, you know, completely without pretense. What do you do to do this? How do you manage this? And yet, you know, just be kind of like someone you'd find it easy to talk with on the street.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you, Mel. This is part of the Rosicrucian tradition, and I mentioned the ancient Greeks. One important tradition in Greece was Delphi, and you probably know the injunction there.
Know thyself.
To know thyself.
Right.
And it's, you know, where we all have this divine spark within us. We all have the potential for anything. Everybody's learning. So it's just understanding that we all have an opportunity to relate to others, to participate and offer something in the world.
Okay. I want to be blunt. When I first went to the museum as a kid and I saw these mummies, I was enormously fascinated. And by the tomb. Why is that? Why are people so fascinated by these things?
Well, you're right that Egypt has had this allure for millennia, and certainly since the 1920s. I think it's because Egypt never reveals all her secrets. There's always still some secret that's still left to be discovered, and this is from everything. Egypt covers everything up with the sand. You know, the Sphinx was covered with sand up to here at one point. So it's understanding that there's more than meets the eye, that these symbols mean more than they may appear to mean.
I think this is a perfect point to uncover the sands from ancient Egypt a bit and do another shot, this time of the museum. We have some very interesting things for you to see in this museum, so here we go. Now this is the front of the museum. It's a beautiful place. We're zooming in on the entry there. Anything you'd like to say?
Well, this is modeled after the Temple of Amun at Karnak, and it's...
Mr. Armstrong, welcome. Yeah, thank you.
Good to have you with us.
May I come in and see your collection?
Absolutely, please do.
The statue that you see behind me here is one of the rarest pieces in the museum collection. It's a statue of Cleopatra VII, the famous Cleopatra, and it's actually one of only 7 remaining statues of Cleopatra in the entire world. Here we have the mummified head of an Apis bull. Now the Apis bull was believed to be the living incarnation of the god Ptah and lived in the town of Memphis. And when one Apis bull died, he was mummified, just like a king would be in the form of a god, and the priests would search the country for the new Apis bull. When he was found, he would be brought to the palace to live as the new Apis bull. Behind me, we have 2 of the most beautiful coffins in the museum collection. They're from the Saite period in Egypt. Over here, we have the coffin of Usermantu, and beside him is the coffin of his first cousin, the lady Ta'awa Sharit. Both of them were from the very powerful Besenmut family in Thebes. And it's within the coffin of Usermantu that we found the museum's unwrapped Egyptian mummy. The mummy that you see before you is one of the 4 mummies we have on display here at the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum. Now, as you can see, this mummy has been completely unwrapped. However, we did not do this to him. He came to the museum this way. And as a result, we don't know his name, we're not sure of his occupation, and we can only guess about when he may have lived. Now, he arrived at the museum in the coffin of Usermantu. However, we believe that it is most probably not him.
Janae, can you explain to us what this is?
Yeah, the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum is also home to a full-scale replica rock-cut tomb. Now, in the late 1930s as well as the 1960s, the Rosicrucian Order sponsored a number of camera expeditions to Egypt in an area called Beni Hassan. Now, in Beni Hassan, you have a number of tombs of the nobles, and they photographed about 40 different tombs. Of those, 15 were in very good condition, so they took the most pictures of those 15, brought them back to the museum, and used those images to create the tomb that you see here.
Wow. Could I go in?
Absolutely. Follow me.
Oh, great.
This is the offering chamber in our replica rock-cut tomb. Now, the primary purpose of the offering chamber was to provide a place where the family of the deceased could come to bring him food every day. In this way, the deceased would never, ever, ever have to worry about starving in the afterlife. Here we have a Serdab statue. Now, the primary purpose of the Serdab statue would be to provide a place where the deceased could look out and make sure that everyone was bringing him the proper amount of food so that he would be able to eat in the afterlife. And if you follow me down, here we can go down into the burial chamber. So we're now down in the burial chamber of our replica rock-cut tomb. And over here, on this wall, you can see the images that our deceased has painted of all his future servants performing the tasks that he's going to have them assigned in the next life, so he won't have to do any work himself. And if you come over here on this wall, you can see our tomb owner performing one of his favorite sports, hunting. So he would take these birds in his hand, shake them until they make a bunch of noise, which would stir up the rest of these wild birds. Then he would take his hunting stick and throw it at it. And if he happened to knock one out of the sky, his hunting cat would go get it. Now in the middle of this tomb, we have our sarcophagus. Now this type of sarcophagus would have been reserved for the pharaoh, someone who would receive it as a gift from the pharaoh, or for the Apis bull. And as you can see, they're very large, and they wouldn't have been buried because they didn't think that tomb robbers would be able to get into them as easily. But as you can see, they've gotten in.
Stephen Armstrong is the curator of the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum. And Stephen Armstrong, Mr. Armstrong, thank you so much for inviting me here. It's been wonderful.
Well, we've enjoyed your visit very much. We're happy you were able to be with us.
Yeah. Mr. Armstrong, I see all these wonderful things which are relevant and significant with symbolism. How are the artifacts here relevant to your philosophy of life today?
Well, for me, to realize that people 5,000 years ago loved life, sought immortality, and enjoyed their families and friends, just as we do today, really gives me a sense of the commonality of humanity across all of time and space. And I think in particular, the yearning for transcendence, the yearning for spirituality is something that is so important to us today, especially as we're surrounded by technology, which of course makes so many wonderful things possible, and yet we must make sure that we don't lose the ideals that have been part of humanity from the very dawn of time, as evidenced here at our Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum.
What a wonderful way to put it. Thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, it's been a joy.
Okay, thank you. I think the theme of what we just saw was immortality of the soul. I've had two guests on this show who have had near-death experiences, and I've read a little bit about the Egyptian view of life and death, and the ka, I can't remember if it's the ka or the ba that leaves the body, and it is able to go through solid substances, and it's able to turn back and look at the image of itself. I just find that tremendously interesting that there are people today who have the actual experience that the Egyptians seem to have had. And yet it takes a brush with death to experience that. How are the Egyptians aware of this phenomenon, that the soul is eternal?
Well, that's a subject that a lot of people are very interested in and presenting different perspectives on. Mm-hmm. For some Egyptologists, they really don't give the ancient Egyptians a lot of credit for the complexity of their belief system. Mm-hmm. However, there are many today that are seeing the similarities with the shamanic tradition and the understanding of going to another plane of consciousness or another plane of awareness and returning with the ability to communicate just beyond what's in our local area to heal. Mm-hmm. And they understood the place that you went to after you passed on. It was a place called Dawat that not only was the place of death, it also was a place like an acorn has the potential for all of life. Mm-hmm. They saw it as that. It was also a place of incredible potential. So their belief system was actually very complex and very profound. And it included not just the two aspects of the soul that you mentioned, mm-hmm. a total of 5 aspects of the soul that had went to various areas and had different experiences after the end of their physical body.
Mm-hmm. I have a lot of technical friends who, again, I keep bringing this up, but they pursue the scientific method, I think, to their own detriment, so that feelings suffer. And I think after a while, after going through the process of just, pushing feelings aside and, relying on so-called facts, that after a while, many of them don't know who they are anymore. Do you see that? I do. I see that in some people I know.
Well, this is a pendulum that keeps shifting back and forth, and it's actually In the 1600s, when the Rosicrucians first made our presence known, this was a time of great superstition and religious intolerance. And it really, in order to be able to survive and to present ideas that were not superstitious, everything had to be presented in a very scientific way that could be validated without any emotion or even any subjectivity in it. So we've kind of taken it from one extreme to the next, and certainly a lot of the greatest scientists see that when you get down to the core of even a cell or the body, you get to something that you just keep going deeper and deeper, and you find energy and information and something that really just can never be pinpointed. There's always that great mystery.
Right. At the end of Rosicrucian studies, one comes to a knowledge, I'm told. And the knowledge is a kind of gnosis. It's a kind of knowing. And I understand it's not definable. But could you tell us something about it?
Well, there really is no end to Rosicrucian studies. Even when we complete the lessons, that it takes many, many years to complete all the lessons and to participate in the various initiations which take place as you progress in our studies. Even then, we look at the earliest lessons again with a completely new perspective. So there is no, it's developing other ways of understanding beyond just the intellectual, and there's no end to that.
Right. On your website there's an interesting quote from the Quran that I looked at, had to read it several times before I got it. The quote is, "And in the shifting of the winds and in the clouds that are pressed into service betwixt heaven and earth are signs to people who can understand." There are signs to people who can understand. And you, in a way, I think, provide that service. You provide a method by which people can understand. And it relies on intuition and the benefits of these courses you offer.
And it relies on the student being open to learning. If we're closed and think we know it all already, no learning's going to take place. So
Right.
we participate in our learning.
Julie, I'm so glad that you could be on the show.
Oh, thank you so much.
And you're wonderfully easy to be around.
Oh, thank you.
And the information comes easily, and you're a real credit to the order. I was expecting some overpowering presence. You're a wonderful person.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I've certainly learned some things from it, and I hope you've enjoyed it. So please, tune in next time, and I'll see you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.